It's not an episode of As the World Turns. I guess our show at this point is As the Search Turns for when it comes to Kentucky men's basketball. Scott Drew pulling his name out of the running. Dan Hurley at UConn officially saying no. Guys, those were the two hottest names for this job. Now Kentucky's got to turn elsewhere. Just your initial reactions to those two pulling out of this.
Well, Scott Drew was the one who we assumed would take it. I think he was Mitch Barnhart's top choice. I think their relationship or their worldviews being as sympathetic as they were made him the most likely choice. And to hear him say no is a little bit jarring, because I even think that the possibility of Kentucky was a big reason he said no to Louisville. So now where do you turn? Dan Hurley was never really realistic. Back-to-back national championships, and when you don't have a top candidate, that's when things get uncomfortable.
Yeah, we've been consistent in saying we didn't think Danny Hurley would come. He's an East Coast guy. His wife's a New Jersey person. He was very upfront about that. I am a little bit surprised about Scott Drew. I thought Mitch Barnhart would have had a better rapport with Scott Drew, because he knew the way this thing was going with Cal over a few years, really, that he would have conversations with Scott Drew and say, if I offer you this job, are you going to come? And for it to get to the point where it came, where his wife and some of his family came to Lexington yesterday and saying no, I'm surprised by that.
And the spotlight of this story, obviously, it started with Calipari and the news that he's leaving, and then we watch him at Arkansas. But it slowly shifts to Mitch Barnhart now, who is the focal point of this search, conducting a massive hire for his legacy. Where does he go to now? Billy Donovan's somebody who everybody wants to talk about, but for the record, he has addressed any rumors about that, saying he hasn't been contacted yet, but he also did not say that he wouldn't be interested in the job. So I think he leads the hypotheticals of where they would want to turn to.
Yeah, I think you go to Billy Donovan. I think he'd be a great choice if he wants to come back to the college game, and that's a big if, because he's never expressed an openness. In fact, though, in his last comments, I thought he was more open to a return to the college game than he has ever sounded. So there may be a possibility there, but you're going to have to wait on him. You're going to have to wait till the Bulls are done with the NBA playoffs. They may not have a very much of a run, but they're going to be playing for a little bit longer. And in the meantime, you need to identify some other candidates you might be interested in if you don't get Donovan, and who are those guys going to be?
Yeah, I've talked to somebody in Chicago who covers the Bulls pretty closely, who says he thinks Donovan would be open to Kentucky. Then somebody else who's in the coaching business today said no way. So we don't really know. The one thing with Donovan, you would have to wait for the NBA season to be over, but Eric was looking back at some past stuff that we've written. Rick Pitino wasn't hired in 1988, I think it was, until June 1st, when the Knicks season was over. So these things take time, and people are going to have to be patient, and nobody's patient.
I think that's a natural transition to a very salient point in this discussion, is that coaching searches now are so different than they have been even 5 years ago. Because if you would have told me that the head men's basketball coach at Baylor was going to say no to Louisville and Kentucky in the same coaching cycle, I would have thought you were crazy. But I understand why he said no. He's a legend at Baylor. I would assume he's going to get a statue, the court named after him, all of those things. Dan Hurley, UConn has been an unbelievable program over the last 25 to 30 years, but there was a time where you could probably make a feasible argument that you would leave Connecticut for Kentucky. So are we just consuming all this a little bit differently now when it comes to a coaching search, social media, the prevalence of it, and the fact that you can win anywhere and not be at a quote-unquote blue blood program?
Well, I think one thing, the Giants, have left the stage. There's no Krzyzewski, Patina. I mean, there is one Giant still on the stage.
Yeah, I was about to say.
We'll talk about him in just a second, because what you said was a natural transition to Rick Pitino. He's still out there. He'd come back. Let's see it. Give him a 4-year deal, let him finish his career at Kentucky, win another championship, go to a Final Four, and wave off into the sunset. But having said that, yes, it's a different world a little bit. The big names are not out there. We're waiting for the next big names. And like you said, Dan Hurley is emerging as one of those. Who else is going to emerge?
Before we came in, I told Eric I was texting people who are connected to the Pitino world, and I said, do you think he would listen? And the answer was, yes, I think
Absolutely,
he would listen.
he would listen.
So you want to make the story in college basketball? Go hire Rick Pitino.
If Josh Hurd used the analogy of Louisville's coach crawling to Louisville to coach the Cardinals, I can only imagine what analogy we could come up with for Rick Pitino leaving New York to come back to Kentucky after I don't
Camelot.
even. I was about to say,
Camelot.
I don't even know if I can fully dive into what that would be. But
let's dive.
Okay, I turned the floor over.
He left the Knicks. He would definitely leave St. John's.
I was about to say, I'll turn the floor over to you two. Know Rick Pitino and covered him as hard as anybody. I mean, a legitimate possibility, who knows? We'll wait that out. But Thoughts on Rick Pitino at Kentucky?
I could see it happening. It'd be a great way for him to rewrite his legacy of, what's happened over the last 7 or 8 years of he came back to a school that he worked at before and won another national title. What more could he do to top what he's already done?
Well, listen, if you don't know who the next hot young coach is that you can get, you could do worse than have a short interim with a guy that can coach and could come in and utilize your resources and motivate your fan base and have fun with it. Than Rick Pitino, while you wait to identify who's going to follow him, would be fun. I'll say that for it.
It could be a long process. It could be a short one. At this point, we do not know. We're going to ride it out with everybody else. And like I said the other day, just keep sending them coffee this way. We'll be good to go. He's Rick Bozich. He's Eric Crawford. I'm Tyler Grieber for WDRB Sports.